morning. Thank you very much for coming. On behalf of the Los Angeles area Chamber of Commerce, thank you for spending a couple of hours with us. This program, I think, is going to be very informative. Good morning again. My name is Carlos Valderama. I am a Senior Vice President of the Chamber involved in global trade, and everything related to exports, imports, foreign investment, and joint ventures is really very close to our heart. So at this moment, I would like to thank, obviously, the folks from Intertech because of their sponsorship and their vision to bring this conference to Los Angeles. And at this moment, we want to move on fast in the program because there's a lot of stuff to discuss. We have a lot of panelists, a lot of speakers, and at this moment, I would like to invite Kevin from the American Apparel and Footwear Association to Los Angeles and also to the Chamber, but also he's going to be our moderator. Kevin?
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. Good morning, everyone. Nice to be here in California. As Ilse reminded me, you look corporate. You don't look like you're from California. I said, you're right, I am, yeah. So I should have worn my beach clothes. Or the time I went to Levi's dressed like this and realized I had a half an hour to go buy stuff down the street in Union Square and went up to see Phil Marino, and he complimented me on all of my Levi's stuff, but he said to me, next time you come over here, you might want to take the label off the jeans. I said, good idea, good idea. So anyway, first of all, everyone, thank you for coming today on relatively short notice. And Carlos, thank you, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for allowing us to use this great room today. And we filled the room. And obviously we filled the room because this program is about solutions. It's about a major issue, but we have to talk about solutions. But as Carlos said, I'm the President and CEO of the American Apparel and Footwear Association. We are located in Arlington, Virginia, and we represent about 1,000 U.S. brands, about 450 companies. Our retail value of the companies that we represent in the United States is at about $340 billion at retail. And that's in a nation that 5% of the world's population, and we buy 25% of the world's clothes. So we're a major producer of clothing, not only produce it, but and also a major buyer of clothing. So both the import and the export equation are really, really important to our members and obviously very important to all of you in the room today. So we're talking a lot today, and my role here is the, as I would call it, the provocateur, or the moderator of a panel of very distinguished folks who I'm going to introduce in a minute. But we're going to talk about Made in the USA. Made in the USA has made a resurgence. Now, when you compare it to the import numbers, they're not big yet, but it's coming. It's coming back. As a matter of fact, last year we saw an increase in consumption of domestically made U.S. clothing compared to a decrease in the importation of clothing coming from offshore, which is the first time in the 12 years I've been CEO I've seen that number, and the trend seems to be coming back toward the United States. Now, how big that is, I don't know the answer to that, but part of the discussion today is about how do we keep companies here in Los Angeles and elsewhere around the country in business by not only selling here in LA, but selling around the world. So why has this become important? Now, this has become a big issue for a lot of our members. Members of Congress are obviously very interested in this because people like the idea of being able to make their goods in the United States, despite whatever the economic conditions are. And there is interest around the world about buying stuff made in the United States, in particular shoes and clothing, which is what we represent. Now, interestingly enough, the free trade agreements, the 3 free trade agreements I'm going to mention really briefly here, have a major impact on your ability to be able to both sell and buy clothing around the world and be able to increase your business. U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement came into effect in March of 2012 after 4 years pending. Now, the good, it's made for a very large market for U.S.-made goods. I think all of us in the room know that. It's an important source for yarn and fabric inputs. The bad news is that it's got a very restrictive rule of origin, which makes it very difficult for companies who want to deal in Korea to figure out the import-export equation. The other issue is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, as we call it, TPP. Now, this is now in its 18th round of negotiations with no end in sight. It seems like the continuous, it's almost like dealing with Doha, Ilse, and Doha never actually came to a resolution. Now, they're going to be meeting in Malaysia in a couple weeks. Our team is going to be there for that. The good, it would expand the source for yarns and fabrics around the world. Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore want our products. They made it really clear. They love buying our products, and they want to make it easier for them. And the bad is, and this is really coming from our government and our trade negotiators is that there is a yarn-forward rule of origin, which at the time right now, we don't think it's workable long-term for the success of this trade agreement. But like we said, we are in the 18th round of this. There's no end in sight, and I don't think we're going to get done anytime soon. So there's a lot more negotiating going on. And then finally, on the trade front, the President in the State of the Union address announced what's called the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP, as we call it, negotiations with the Europeans. And that's actually one of the reasons why we're here today, because those negotiations are set to begin in July, but yet the announcement by the EU on the denim issues, why we're here today, is one of the reasons why I've never seen negotiations begin, or not even begin, with somebody throwing sand in the gears to throw us off course. Usually, it's like dating. You go out, you want to put your best impression on before you sit down at the table or commit yourself. And what the Europeans appear to have done here is thrown a shot across the bow by taking this industry, high-end denim, and being the victim of the possibility of tricky negotiations with the Europeans on the TTIP program. Now, why is it important for us? Europe represents about 40% of the world's clothes and consumption of clothes. That's a big number. That's an enormous number. So folks in California, that's a number you have to look at is where am I going to sell my clothes next time? Not just in the US, 5% of the world's population, but to our friends in Europe. Important source of yarns and fabrics for US manufacturers, very important for them. And obviously, it's a hot market for US-made goods. Despite the fact that Europeans make lots of their own brands, they still love US brands, the same way the Japanese do. Same way that, to some extent, the Chinese do, but the problem in China, and Ilse and I talked about this, is not so much about making in China, it's about being able to sell in China, our brands. That's the challenge. So, every trade agreement has its good and bad parts to it. I think we all know that. So, why are we here today? We're here today to talk about what impact the EU's decision could have and has had, and we'll find that out today from our panelists, on this industry, and more importantly, what do we do to fix it? But it all hinges on what's called the Byrd Amendment. And those of you who are not involved in politics wouldn't know what the Byrd Amendment is. Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia had the Senate pass a bill to provide for relief for U.S. companies who were negatively impacted by unfair imports. In other words, by dumping or subsidized product. Okay? For domestic industry, that was a good thing because it protected you from unfair imports. That really, main industries involved with that was steel and ball bearings. That was the whole reason for this to begin with. So back in the WTO, found that this was illegal. And in 2005, it ended. And Congress repealed the Byrd Amendment, which we thought was a good thing, but left in place this fund of about $120 million, of which there's about 60 million of that is affected by our industry, which essentially is penalizing our industry for making here in California, or anywhere else, and selling into Europe. And it really has nothing to do with what we've done, but this is a European reaction to what they think is unfair trade practices. That's really what it boils down to. Now, the EU can retaliate by placing duties on goods equal to the value of the government payouts. So that's where that $60 million number comes from. So this year, as I said, $120 million was paid out, and the EU can retaliate on about 60 million of that. So what's the solution here? And that's what we're here for. What is the solution? One, we can ask the Obama administration to get the Europeans to back off, and that's part of our job. Actually, it's really our collective job. It's my job to work with Ilse and her team at the CFA, work together in Washington to convince Washington that this is the wrong tact, the wrong message for the Europeans to be sending to us, since we see them as a 40% of our big market. That's no way to start in negotiations. And also, get Congress can, for once and for all, repeal the funding provisions of this to stop these payments, which would be the ideal situation. But the ironic part of this, as I said before, is the Byrd Amendment was originally put in to protect domestic businesses, and as a net result of what's happened in the world, it's actually hurting domestic businesses. So my role today as a provocateur, and that's what I'm going to be, and I'm going to ask people later for questions, the way we've set this up is that each panelist is going to get a question, and each panelist will answer the question, and I'm hopeful that every other panelist will have something to say. Now, we have 2 hours, and it seems like a long period of time, but I have a ton of questions to ask here. And later on, you're going to get to ask questions. But so write down your questions. The value of this is not only to come up with the solutions, but to discuss opportunities that exist outside of the U.S. and the EU for brands seeking global growth. Now, my guess is many of you are seeking global growth. Who isn't? Especially with the numbers I just gave before, including Korea, including the FTA, hopefully in Europe, and also with TPP, and any other negotiations that might come up moving forward that allow our products to be sold and made all over the world. But what we're focusing on today is made in California, and how is it going to help your companies succeed in the global environment. So let me introduce today's very distinguished panel. I'm not going to start lining up here. I've had it done alphabetically. I guess it's not even done alphabetically. Okay, Marty Bailey, the Chief Marketing and Manufacturing Officer of American Apparel. Marty, raise your hand. Marty's right here. You all know Marty. Then Tracy Gray, the Senior Advisor to the Mayor here in Los Angeles and a board member of the LA Region Export Council. Right there, okay. And Carlos Valderama, the Senior Vice President of Global Initiatives for the LA Chamber of Commerce and also a Vice President of the LA Region Export Council Board of Directors. Thank you. Carlos, who introduced me. Thank you, Carlos. And to my immediate left, and I'm in her neighborhood, and this is her place and her team and her people, and I'm pleased to be here. I will remember that. And for those of you who don't know our relationship, she always reminds me of that. And that's okay, because well, you know that California was annexed years ago. They just never bothered telling anybody. So
we may have to separate you two.
We might, no. Oh, this is a love fest. You ought to see what it gets like, yeah. So anyway, as you all know, Ilse does a great job as the president of the California Fashion Association. It's not a thing that Ilse doesn't have something to say about in California, rightfully so, that protects and helps her industry, and she does a great job. But I don't need to tell you that, but I do, publicly. Andre Raghu, the Chief Strategy Officer at Tradegood, and again, Tradegood is the reason why we're here. Andre, where are you there? Thank you very much. You and your team have been wonderful. And last but not least, Deborah Greaves, the Secretary and General Counsel of True Religion Apparel. Deborah, raise your hand. So this is our distinguished panel. So now I get to sit down in this kind of wacky seat here, and I'm not going to fall backwards like Ilse did. But in any event, I'm going to start the first question with Deborah. Can everybody hear me, by the way? Okay. Deborah, you ready? Okay, you're ready. All right, so the EU tariff announcement caught everybody here by surprise. Was everybody surprised by that? Yeah. Okay, so it caught us by surprise, and nobody had a lot of time to prepare. So tell us what True Religion has done since the announcement. And remember, be provocative is, you know, this is supposed to be provocative. So you have the floor. And then everybody on the panel, please jump in when she's finished her response. Deborah?
We moved manufacturing out of LA for the women's goods. That's what we did. Not all of the women's manufacturing, but a portion of it. And the reason is that you have to consider that the orders for these particular goods were placed some time ago at certain prices, and in order to meet those prices for the sales in Europe, there was no way that we could manufacture and ship those goods from Los Angeles. So you can see already that jobs have been lost.
So, panelists, Ilse, I know you're ready to jump off here. Go for it.
When we heard about this and we informed the 23 premium denim makers in Los Angeles about it, and for the most part everybody was shocked. There were varying degrees of reactions. I will address all of this, and there's a great little snippet of a video by the Voice of America that shows Peter Kim of Hudson's reaction. We have had reactions from J Brand, from Joe's Jeans, from AG, all of these people in varying degrees. The problem is not just women's jeans move. A manufacturer cannot just move one section of their production. All of it moves. They move men's, children's, they move tops. It's not just one small area that moves out of the area. And it's not, our companies do not suffer. True Religion's probably profits will go up and their business will continue to blossom It's the jobs that are lost. It's the washes, the contractors, it's the yarn, it's the fabric that comes in, the zippers that are sold here. That's what's gone. The companies do just fine. But what suffers is that whole made in USA value. That's what suffers.
Deborah, you agree with that?
I do, and I have to say that True Religion is very proud to be a Made in USA company. It's one of our core cultures. So it's very distressing to the company to have to respond to this tariff, this sudden tariff, in such a drastic way. We will continue to try to have a manufacturing presence in Los Angeles as long as we can. But you have to understand, this is not the friendliest environment for a textile manufacturing organization. The regulations that we're subjected to in California are quite extensive. Everything from Prop 65 and now Obamacare, which some of our contractors have expressed concern about. Just layers and layers of regulations, and they keep coming. And this is a time when our industry needs concessions and exceptions. And what we find is year after year, more regulations either on the federal level or the state level, and it doesn't seem to align with this whole government initiative of we want to keep manufacturing in America and in Los Angeles. So our position is that if there really is a government interest in retaining that sector in the state and in the country, then let's see some action. Let's see some positive steps to facilitating our continued existence.
Carlos is raising his hands here. Carlos, you want to respond to that?
Well, I'll tell you, I think that Deborah is correct in the sense that, some of the regulations and duty rates are affecting not only your industry, but every industry. I had a chance to have lunch with Mr. Timmons, who is the president of the NAM, the National Association of Manufacturers here in Los Angeles a couple of days ago. And a lot of manufacturing companies obviously said, you know what, we need to do something with our government, because they found out that it's the NAM, National Association of Manufacturers, that our products, right from the start, are 20% higher everywhere in the world because of government regulations. This is the NAM. 20% of our products, just from the start, are more expensive than anywhere in the world because of regulations. So I guess this comment goes with what Deborah was saying. I think we need to be more vocal, not only at the city level, the state and the federal, to begin to see how these regulations can be diminished and or abolished. Otherwise, you and everyone in manufacturing is going to be 20% higher anytime. Thank you.
Tracy, I was just about to have you jump in because as an advisor to the outgoing mayor, obviously it's in the best interest of the city of Los Angeles to keep these businesses here. So over the course of the mayor's term and your term as well, how do you see the trend, and what do you see the future mayor doing to be able to help?
Well, I'm not going to answer what the future mayor is going to do. I can't tell you that. I'll be gone tomorrow's my last day.
She can pretty much say what she wants.
I'm not. We do have someone here who will be staying with the future mayor, but I'm not sure she even knows what is coming up next with that, and that's Nicole Beckett. She can raise her hand. But I guess I have some questions to the industry myself, and hopefully a couple of answers. When I came in 4 years ago to the mayor's office, we immediately started to focus on this industry. It's one of our 12 top industries, and we knew the importance of this. But one of the issues we have, not to be a little provocative myself, is the industry was very fragmented. It was difficult bringing them together to come to a consensus of what can the government do. We heard a lot of, you don't do this, you don't do that, you don't do this, but we never could get you together in the way we thought would be a positive action to get you guys together to tell us what we can do and realize the city can't do all that much with our limited resources. So one of the areas we did come together was with the chamber, with other organizations to form the Los Angeles Regional Export Council, LARExC. So, because we felt like exporting was the number one way to expand your businesses and to help these businesses. So instead of waiting for Washington to do what they were going to do, we started focusing on these 12 industries, and apparel was one of the industries. One of the first areas we went to Magic, and Nicole was there in Magic, and had the first LA-focused pavilion at Magic. And we partnered with the federal government, with the state, with the chamber, and we have these STEP grants, a small, what is it?
Trade promotion grants.
Promotion grants, and we offset the cost for companies to go there. That was very successful, and how we led to a partnership with Tradegood. So what we're trying to do is to partner with the private sector, leverage the limited resources we have. We have pretty much one person focused on fashion. But we really need this industry to come together and figure out solutions. And I'm hoping this panel will help start that. Now, my question for Deborah is it more efficient and it's a better economic value for to move for something that is supposed to last only a year and then never come back to LA, when the branding of LA and the USA is so important right now? Is that intangible of that brand and losing that brand worth the move to Mexico or to someplace else? And this is a question. I really do not know the answer to that.
It's possible that will come back. It really depends on how long the duty lasts and whether or not the government is able to convince the EU to revoke or reduce the duty earlier. I don't think it's our intention to permanently move the manufacturing, but on the other hand, it depends on what other volleys are thrown our way over the next year or two that impact our ability to continue to do business and thrive in this environment. You have other things that are on the horizon, like the Obamacare, which, as I mentioned before, is of great concern to some of our local factories, and other regulations that seem to keep popping up. So it really just depends on what happens. I also want to say that we were never approached to participate in any kind of industry initiative, and that may just be because the messaging was not coming from the proper places. But if we had that message, certainly we would participate. So I too welcome this panel today.
So with the fact that we've determined that we're an overregulated industry, which we are, and when I tell student groups that you're about to enter one of the most regulated industries in the country, they kind of laugh. How can you think that clothing and footwear are hazardous to your health? All you have to do is come to California, and I love California, but look at Prop 65. And if you talk to a shoe manufacturer about the challenge of bringing footwear products into California, they'll tell you how difficult it is having to clear customs with what comes in from China. But the only person on the, Marty, you represent a very visible company here in California. Tell us your thoughts on this.
Well, I think that I was asked at one point, how are our employees affected by a situation like this? And quite frankly, in this particular situation, it's a huge part of our business. We make last year we made 21,000 SKUs under one roof here in Los Angeles. So it's it's a very broad product line. Yeah, I think our employees could be affected a number of ways, but it really depends on how the company approaches it. You know, if it's in situations like this, and while we're not affected as much by this, but we truly over the past 12 years we've been affected by a number of things that really puts pressure on our cost, on our margins. You know, we can look at cost cutting measures, which in many cases will affect your employees adversely. But because we're here, because we have everything under one roof, because we have everything right before our eyes, we really use that as an opportunity to see how we can improve our costs. In this situation, to take a really hard look at what we're doing and why we're doing it, and asking why 5 times, why we do it that way. Look at our labor efficiencies, look at our fabric utilizations, look at our markers, look at our vendors on the outside that we deal with to help support us in what we're doing. Look at our quality, look at our returns, look at every aspect of the pipeline in order to improve our costs. Not just look ourselves, but have everybody in the pipeline look as well to tell us what we're not seeing. So in many situations, and I'm not comparing to Deborah, but in many situations, challenges like this can turn into quite frankly, blessings to where you actually are better because of it. And in a situation where if it was a increased tariff in this case, there's plenty of opportunities where we've improved our cost, and it creates more opportunities outside of that. So, at the end of the day, versus adversely affecting our employees, maybe it's caused us to do the work to actually enhance their job security.
Ilse, do you agree with that?
Well, I certainly agree with that, and I think American Apparel has done a great job at figuring out the costs. One thing Marty is not touching on is the issue of immigration. Now, if we are going to expand our manufacturing base even by 10 or 15%, the question becomes, where do we get the workers? Where do we get the workforce if in Marty's case, he had to lay off over 3,000 people in the past 2 years? Am I correct? Was it? It was 1,800. 1,800. I tend to exaggerate for a point. But for his 1,800, then there are thousands of other companies here in town, and at least 400 contracting that had the same issue, that they had to fire people, good people, and the question is, how do you replace them? So if you increase your factory output, who is going to do the job? That is another issue that the government has to get behind. Just fix it. We have no political position on this, on how to fix it. Just fix it.
But the fix will probably be a political one. They always are.
Exactly.
It's one of the things we end up having to deal with, and they're always a political solution. Andre, you've been kind of silent over there. You want to say anything on this, or do you want to save your
I've been actually kind of afraid
later?
to get involved in this debate. But one thing I think is important is for the audience to have an appreciation. I think we as industry members also for the bigger picture. I mean, the reality is that a lot of the things that we're seeing in terms of the constraints being introduced, whether domestically or the ones that are being introduced abroad, have a lot to do with the rebalancing of the global economy. And I mean, I think the 10,000-pound gorilla in the room is that as China is moving faster toward a consumption economy, it's really changing things everywhere. It's changing things here. It's changing things in Europe as well. And you'll see that even with us here domestically within the United States, we are now making the move from a consumption economy to a bit of a hybrid economy. We now want to export, and we want to be somewhere in the middle. And unfortunately, the painful, I would say, transition is really a lot of what we're talking about today. It's a necessary transition as people try to figure out how do we make it work on both sides. And I will tell you, when I was thinking about this and going into this, I had a slightly of a, I would say, maybe I'm an optimist, but a silver lining view about this. I really believe that we are introducing an opportunity for us to look at a lot of things that we thought were blips on the radar, but really things that need to be addressed as critical infrastructure to get us to move forward. I mean, these things are not new. These are things that we knew about, but we just never really thought Europe would do it. So as Kevin said, well, wow, they did it before a trade agreement. I don't think it's the last sign that we're going to see as this rebalancing takes place, because the more we look forward to revitalizing our industry, the more people are going to have to respond, because obviously it's going to have a global impact. So I think, again, Kevin, from my perspective, while there are lots of things other people need to do, I think as an industry, we also have to accept the things we haven't done. And we have, I think to some extent, have been a bit reactive, and now we're facing really a wall where we have no other choice but to figure out solutions and how to move forward.
Thanks, Andre. There's a segment of the industry I didn't mention earlier, but that make in the U.S., it's the U.S. military. And under the Berry Amendment, they're required to make their product here in the U.S. with all the inputs that Ilse had mentioned earlier. The challenge they have is the sequester and the downsizing in Afghanistan and the military in general. One of the things that Tradegood has been working with us on is how do we find business for these American manufacturers who are used to making military product, but now have an opportunity to go into the commercial product as well. So this is an issue across the board for domestic manufacturers, not only those who are selling commercial, but also selling military that might have to transition into commercial or quasi-commercial because they've been so used to making for the military, but yet the demand is not there, nor will the demand be there until we have a next surge, and hopefully for our country, I hope we don't have another surge anytime soon. But that said, that rolls into the next question I want to ask the entire group, and I'm going to go right down the line here. Looking into your crystal ball, where does Made in the USA apparel stand in 5 years from now? I mean, we can talk about here in solutions, in which we want to come up to. So where does it come? Why don't we start with you, Ilse, and we'll walk right.
Where it depends on how well we market to the next generation. We've read many studies that the older the person, the more they care. The youth doesn't seem to look inside the garment as to where it's made. They just want it. They want it now. And if we market, so that's an area of positive growth or positive opportunity. As an industry, we've done a lousy job of saying there is value to a California, Los Angeles, Made in USA, all of it. We really have only shown our product. We haven't talked about where it comes from or how important it is to them. It's starting to ripple up from the consumer, and it starts with the consumer. If the consumer doesn't care, then all of this is worthless. We'll make it wherever we can make a profit. But in today's LA Times, I must call your attention to a 2-page spread by that small company called Apple. Okay? Upside down. And it says, designed by Apple
Somebody
in
take a
California.
picture of this, please.
This is very appropriate in this morning's paper. Designed by Apple in California. Now, what prompted Apple to need to say that? Obviously, there's a groundswell and there's a surge of value added to something that's coming from the United States, whether it's designed here or made here. We have value to that, and I don't think we're doing a very good job as an industry, as marketing experts, as associations, to add value to what we do.
Marty?
My crystal ball fell off my desk this morning.
Oh, there's no excuse. You got to give an answer. Come on. Mine broke about 12 years ago, and
But if I was able to put it back together, again, I think, and then look into it, I'd see a lot of different directions that it could go. And what's the future of U.S. manufacturing in 5 to 10 years? I can say from American Apparel standpoint, we've been committed, for the past 15 years to not only Made in the USA, but made here in Los Angeles. I think and that's where we're committed for the future. I think we're pointed to when there's conversation about the viability, the validity of manufacturing in the United States at a larger scale. I think there's, to Ilse's point earlier, I think there's a number of factors that will help determine if it can continue to grow or if it stops. And quite frankly, to me, one of the main keys of being able to reestablish a manufacturing base here for apparel and textiles, is before the Senate now and hopefully before Congress soon, and it's the immigration situation.
well, the immigration issue is going to be the bellwether as to whether or not the Republicans ever hold the White House again, and miss opportunities to be able to bring various groups into their fold, and also more importantly for the economy, to grow the economy, because that really is, as Ilse said earlier, that's a key issue in our industry. It's always been a key issue in our industry. So let's move forward. Deborah, I know you expressed your thoughts a little bit before, but your crystal ball.
Mine also broke. But I will say that I agree with what Ilse said. There's a lot of factors that will play into it. I do believe that the industry as a whole needs to have a much louder voice. I think that we can have a louder voice, and there's been a little bit of passiveness in terms of vocalizing our needs and the critical state of the industry before our politicians and our government. So I do believe we need to be much louder and more united. That's critical. I think also that consumer awareness is going to fuel that somewhat. It's always a question of supply and demand, and if you've got demand for USA products, then you're going to have more ability to sell them and get them into the marketplace.
Well, on that, let me ask a question to the audience there. You all make made in the US, but when a person goes into Macy's or goes into any major retailer and they go looking for a particular product, is it your experience that they're looking at the label to see where it's made, or looking at the price or the quality or the price point, the color, the fit? So to Deborah's point, if Americans aren't looking for made in America, then we need to talk about how important it is for made in America. But my experience has been addressing groups all over the country is I always ask people, when you go into a store, what are you looking for? You're looking for a particular type of product. Men and women shop differently. But when you go into a store, I would say out of 100 people, maybe 5% will say to me in a group that I'm going in there looking for made in USA. So if that's true, and I've been doing this for a long time, then we got our work cut out for us, because if only 5% are asking that question, then to Deborah's point, to Ilse's point, everybody else's point, is that we need to ramp up the importance of this for not only the survival of your business, but yes, made in America is good. So, well, I'll get off my soapbox here, but Andre.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to add to that. I mean, we have manufacturers here, and I have here the labels behind Eileen Fisher, ABS, Barbara Lessa, Karen Kane, who have found that stores are coming to them because they know that they have product that is made in USA. Major stores, Dillard's, Nordstrom's, Macy's, who want a section of apparel that clearly defines made in USA because they're being asked for it. Now, none of these people are altruistic or doing all of these labels for their own benefit. They're doing it because they're asked to do it, and that is new. So hopefully that will continue.
Andre?
And actually, I will echo that, and by saying that I'll kind of make a bold prediction. I do believe there will be a resurgence, and the term I've been coining recently and speaking with people in industry has been the one of what I call reshoring. I know that 20 years ago, offshoring was the big dirty word in our industry. But you can see, if you kind of look at the facts and look at the trends, that there are blips on the radar that continue to appear that suggest that reshoring is going to become something more in the future. You know, you can look at, in the electronics industry with Lenovo establishing investment in North Carolina and bringing some parts of the processes there. We can see foreign investment happening in the agriculture industry. So you can start to get a sense that really there is an understanding, even by offshore players, that there is value in sort of reshoring. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about some other things, is that I think some of the arguments and some of the debates that are happening now are also going to fundamentally shift. For example, there is always the belief in the debate about cost and wages and the benefits of going offshore. But if you look at the trend, 2006, comparatively, in our wages in China, there was probably about a $17 gap, where most economists predict that by 2015, there will probably be about a $6 gap or a $7 gap. So one has to ask themselves the question, when you start to do the math, is it really that beneficial to go offshore, or can you derive those savings elsewhere through logistics or other things by producing domestically and reaping the advantages of speed to market, et cetera? And then also, even though I know there's been a lot of punches at our current administration, and you know, I have my own gripes as well. But I think one thing that we're doing good, and I like to live off the good sometimes, is that I think what we're doing in fuels, especially shale fuels, will really help and benefit our industry, because we're going to be able to perhaps in the future operate manufacturing plants a lot more efficient than most other people in the world are going to be able to do because of these sorts of investments. So again, I think if we really look at the future, it's not certainly going to happen small term, and I want to preface this by saying we're not going to bring the 19 million jobs from 20 years ago back to manufacturing, back to the United States, but the jobs that should be here will come back.
Well, one of the interesting things to add on to that, Andre, is that we found, and we did a study that we released this year, that about 75% of the value add of U.S. products is U.S. value add. Now, you might make the product in Vietnam or China, but 75% of the value of that product is actually U.S. And it's not traditional manufacturing value add, it's value add of all the other parts of the industry that take a part in making that product. And it could be the design, it could be the logistics, it could be the merchandising. But the 75% value add, that means money coming back to the U.S. Doesn't solve the problem of manufacturing here, as we have in California. But which leads me to, I'm going to ask a joint question on the same line with Tracy and with Carlos. Now, when you're looking in your crystal ball, and I just wrote down here, proudly made in Los Angeles. Now, we're talking about made in the USA. Where do you see that in 5 years? I'll ask both of you the same question.
Well, as I like to, since I am political and I like to pivot toward the question I actually want to answer instead of the question you're asking me.
Well, Tracy, I do that all the time, so go ahead. Yeah.
I'm going to do that right now, and I'm going to throw it back at you. I think you asked the audience, are your consumers coming to you or looking at your product and looking at the label and saying, I want made in America? I think you're asking that question to the wrong people. It's to the people who are not in this room or in this country. 95% of the consumers are outside the USA, and they do want made in the US. We've been on several trade missions and trade shows, on investment road shows where people are clamoring either to buy American companies or have some partnership with our company so that they can put that label on. The initiative that we first came together with, Tradegood, the designed and made in LA initiative that we're just starting to launch and get off the ground, was done because people wanted to say they were in LA. They may have a little office here and then they put on made in LA. Well, we want to verify that these companies are, like you, are actually in LA, and then, as Ilse was saying, market this. Marketing and branding LA with what we have is really important, and we're not doing a great job at that. But so the question isn't domestic consumers what they want. It's the Chinese, it's the Brazilians, it's the 6 out of the 10 countries, 6 out of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa. So we're not looking at the right place. We shouldn't be looking at the kids that are buying down in the grove. We should be looking at the groves that are being built in Africa and South America. So I think it's a different question that you should be asking, and what we're trying to get all the companies to look at. Now, don't just look at Europe. Look at other places. Don't leave Los Angeles because Europe is doing this. Think about other markets that you can go into, because we all want to diversify. Business is about diversifying. You don't put all your risk in one basket. You got to diversify. So just because Europe is doing this, look at the other economies that are growing faster than Europe, who want to have their middle class, they have money now, they want to spend it on US goods. So you've got to rebalance not only are our economies rebalancing, our companies need to rebalance, think of things differently. And we're at a tipping point. Right now, everybody wants made in America, but they couldn't want made in Brazil 5 years from now if we don't go the right direction. So we just got to make sure we do the right things.
You know, the biggest challenge to made in America is our own government. If you go to the US government, there are multiple definitions as to what's made in America. But if you go to Italy, and it could say made in Italy, it could be 10% Italian content and 90% content made in China, but yet their rules say made in Italy. We have domestic companies like Allen Edmonds in Wisconsin who want to sell, just like you folks, get out of the US market and sell in Japan. Now they have challenges in Japan in terms of the number of shoes you can actually import in Japan, leather shoes that the Japanese have tariff protected. However, their biggest challenge is that they have two definitions of made in America in the United States that they have to adhere to, but yet they're competing against countries that have a very different definition of what's made in their country. So again, the challenge is dealing with our own government. Sometimes one side does not talk to the other, nor do they want to either. Now, I forget, Carlos, you're down that end there too. What is your crystal ball saying?
Well, I don't have one.
No.
I always like to go back to the experience. I have been doing business in Latin America for a number of years, and I can tell you that, generally speaking, the U.S. made label has always been very strong in Latin America. And I think it's much stronger today, especially in consumer products. And I guess the industry that I want to go and focus a little bit is cosmetics. I think the cosmetics industry does a fantastic job throughout Latin America, showcasing not only that the products made here, but it's also the lifestyle. Lifestyle, Malibu, Hollywood, whatever that might be. And I think younger buyers go for that. And I believe that the other industry that I guess they don't go for the lifestyle, but other industries that they go more on the quality of our products is in the medical industry. They do very well in Latin America, showcasing that our products have high quality, especially in dealing with in the medical field. So again, I believe that your industry, I think, needs to look more at what Tracy's saying. The consumer markets are growing throughout Latin America. Their income is faster than, those economies are growing faster than the U.S. The U.S. this year is going to probably grow about 2.8. However, in Latin America, the average is probably close to 6.5. And so they want to buy our products. And we need to go there, participate in trade shows. But it is not only the product, but it's also the lifestyle message that I think is very important in consumers' mind.
I think I feel like I'm at the Kentucky Derby here, and the gate's just about to go, and Ilse wants to answer that question.
Well,
and so I'm going to go bing, the gate's just open.
I go back to the body politic, but we do have to solve it. I mean, it's wishful thinking, because cosmetics and biomed in those countries are not being done there. Apparel is being sewn there. We cannot get one bit of a bathing suit into Brazil. Made in USA is not allowed in Brazil by virtue of their tariffs on us, or it's allowed by something like a 57% tariff rate. So
well, you could do it, but you'd pay a big tariff rate.
A huge tariff rate. I think you've been trying to get into Brazil for 3 years. So there are certain blocks to apparel that we must recognize, because many, many countries use apparel and textiles as their bottom-up industries to put people to work in their countries. And that creates some kind of barrier to having us come in with what we think is superior product and certainly superior style. We cannot get merchandise into China made in USA. We can make deals with them and have distributors there with Chinese manufacturers, and so our brand becomes important in China. But to have actual shipments going that way of T-shirts, not right now.
So that leads me into the next question here, a perfect segue into, I'm sorry, Andre.
I just wanted to add something, because I do feel strongly that the comments made by Ilse, that they're quite important, that we all understand it. But I think equally so, we need to also have an appreciation that there's certainly no denying the fact that it's an extremely difficult situation and the pressure is growing with the constraints across the world. But I think what's important is that we still need to be somewhat grounded in understanding that true success for us in the future is going to play its way out by finding new sources of growth. I mean, this is the undeniable fact that we have to be focused on. And why I say that, it's really because as I go around and I speak with even companies within our domestic market, and I ask them about why they don't buy more locally. The answers sometimes to me are even profound, and I've lived in this industry for years, and I've heard everything from, well, we don't know where to go, to, well, we don't have the time to chase people around, or people don't have global supply chains, and we need to provide to a global stores. We can't just buy one-offs. And to me, these sorts of responses are really practical issues that can be resolved. But whenever I show up at, and I would say be resolved by introducing, some level of practical measures in terms of infrastructure and other things. But most of the conferences I appear at, a lot of the discussion is always only focused on trade policy. And I don't say this to downplay it, but I think it's equally important as an industry that we also embrace there are short-term measures and there are steps that we can take that actually will lead us to reform in trade policy in other areas, and we should just be mindful for that as we go forward.
So, Tracy?
No.
Oh, that said, this segues perfectly into the next question, and some of them have already addressed it. So where are the opportunities then? Where are the opportunities, in your view, moving forward? Carlos, you want to start?
Well, I agree, and I think Ilse and I, we know for a long time we agree and disagree on a lot of things. But I think, again, looking back to perhaps Latin America and the Pacific Rim, my experience has been that it is easier, and I'm not going to say is the only way, but it is easier to do business with a country that has had or has signed a free trade agreement with the United States. And so, those agreements are negotiated by those countries. They provide you with a legal framework as to the things that you can and cannot do. And so when you look at those free trade agreements, you need to look at the document, sometimes more than 1,000 pages. But as you go through those agreements, look at it as almost like a marketing plan. Look at the chapter that applies to your industry, and then you can see whether or not it's something that you want to do. Just to give you an idea, in the Pacific Rim area in Latin America, the U.S. government has signed almost 22 free trade agreements. And so it is almost natural, I think, for somebody who does or does not have a lot of experience in international trade to look at those markets first. And then it will be easier to go into a second, or third, or fourth market. It is a little bit more difficult to do business in Brazil because the Brazilians don't want to have a free trade agreement with us, and obviously they're going to do anything they can to put us obstacles for our products. But let's go to Colombia, let's go to Chile, let's go to other places where they have a free trade agreement with us, and at least our government has had some sort of a vision in order to develop good relationships with them.
To Carlos' point, one of the benefits that we give to our members at AFA is we produce country reports. And these country reports are basically a front and back piece of paper on how to do or how to get into a foreign market. I think we have 11 or 12 countries that we are working on, more to come. The reason why I bring this up is if the opportunity is not only just selling into the United States, this enormous market, but how do we do it in other places? The barriers to trade are not necessarily visible to most people. Some countries have enormously, like Ilse said, Brazil. Brazil's got tariff. They talk a good story, but the only way you do business in Brazil is having a Brazilian partner and having it manufactured in Brazil. That's a tough thing for an American manufacturing brand. So, but again, the issue here is, what are somebody's phone's going on here. It's not mine. So wake up call?
Where is it?
Not mine.
I'm hoping it's not.
No.
Or mine. I didn't even know I had one. You wanna look
I have
at
a message from my wife who asked me which Marriott I stayed at last night, but that was, yeah. And so,
I didn't even know I had a clock.
no, 10 o'clock. It was Ilse here, all right. Maybe that was her message to move on to the next question, I don't know. All right, Deborah, do you want to add on to this, or?
What was your question?
No,
No,
emerging markets, the markets, and you're looking at it from perspective of the city of Los Angeles. Your perspective is to keep business here, keep manufacturing here. But yet the reality is that in order for companies to grow and prosper, they not only have to look at this region to manufacture, but look at other regions to export, to grow your business. So.
well, I do definitely agree with Carlos around the free trade agreements. I believe there's a contiguous line of free trade agreements from the Pacific Rim all the way down on the west coast of Latin America, except for Ecuador.
Right.
So dipping into those areas first is really important. And also, but you have to know your product. Premium jean products may not go well in Bolivia, or whereas a low-cost jean would, or something else. So we have and part of the Los Angeles Regional Export Council, what we are trying to do is to streamline the assistance that we give businesses to figure out where you should go based on your product. And we have some of our partners in the room. We have Julianne Hennessy from the UZAC, the commercial services. As you have to sit here and hear all things wrong with government, what she does is very helpful. You know? Of course, there's limited resources, but we have her here. We have Bronwyn Madden with her hand up over there from the Center for International Trade Development, who helps companies small and medium all the time on figuring out the best places to go. So we're trying, the Chamber has several programs to help where they will actually bring together experienced MBA students to look at your business and create an exporting business plan for you. And we, as part of these grants we have from the federal government, we subsidize half of that. So there are ways, you can't say which are the best markets because it's going to be depending on your individual company and your individual products, but there are places you can go, and we're trying to make that easier with our partnership, including our partnership with Tradegood. And I'd like Andre to talk a little bit about what we're doing with Tradegood and the platform that you have.
Yeah, I think specifically, actually, since I'm not in politics, I can actually answer your question.
Okay, sorry.
Andre, we're all in politics.
I'm getting better at this than I thought I was. What a question.
But I just wanted to say one thing is that, we've recently done with the mayor's office, actually, we've had some foreign manufacturers over to LA and actually looking at opportunities for partnering and cooperating with local manufacturers. And again, the learnings are just very interesting for me as we go through the process because, the two sort of biggest learnings I think I've come out with is that one, certainly there really is a demand from a lot of different markets to want to purchase made in the USA goods or made in LA or made in New York or what have you. But the biggest challenge I see is being able to identify suitable partners. They just simply don't understand how to do it. And compatible partners. The second biggest challenge that I'm also seeing is that, if design is the attribute that I most need, maybe I can partner with them in design, or maybe manufacturing is not the right model. So they're in search of kind of business models of how they can actually cooperate and leverage. And my sense is that in this market, we have, again, a huge for growth expansion by also exploring different business models. It may not just be, the concept of just vertical manufacturing. We're just going to produce something and sell it to someone, because in some cases, people are looking for different ways to engage. Just the world is different now, and how things are working are different. So I really think, Kevin, from our side, it behooves us to really look at our advantages today and figure out, rather than just kind of selling the whole shop in a traditional format, are there different ways that we can actually engage and we can leverage our advantages? And I think the delegation that came from China was a great example, because they were really, really hungry for being able to tap in and partner in a long-term way with people that have great design skill, great knowledge of this market. They're interested in coming to the US, but they're scared to death to expand in the US because they don't know the consumer, they don't know the risk that's going to be involved, and for them, the perfect model is to actually identify people that do have that knowledge and do have that experience and to work with them. You're popular today. Oh, it's the phone. Oh, okay. But anyway, that's the point. I certainly think that's the expansion model we need to look for.
It's called an off button. Well, I have a question based on Andre's statement here. How many people here? I have an idea. I'm going to put it in the water thing here. Yeah. How many people in the room here sell into the DR CAFTA region?
Okay.
DR CAFTA, Central America, Dominican Republic, Latin America. How many people sell into that region?
Product, though.
Product.
RAM.
Yeah. Well, RAM, we know you sell everywhere, RAM.
Yeah, you sell technology.
Yeah. But in terms of clothing, footwear. Okay, in the DR. How many would like to sell down there? Not really, huh? Okay. Well, again, yes, why? Yeah, exactly. Why? Why wouldn't you want to sell to an emerging market like that? I mean, one of the things that we did when we helped negotiate that treaty was to make certain that you had reciprocity. Not only were we going to make it there, but we're going to be able to sell our product here, both made in the U.S. as well as made there back into the U.S. So I would think that in a market that close to the United States, where the supply chain is a lot shorter than it is coming in from China, why this would not be a perfect opportunity to be able to try to figure out a business relationship for countries that are making the step up from a very low cost of living, very low, up into a middle class cost of living, where they can start being able to afford U.S. brands. Because again, everybody likes to buy U.S. brands. It's a question of price.
May I answer that?
Go ahead, Ron.
I think the brands and the manufacturers who have their own teams going out sourcing, so to speak, need to communicate with their own management. The sourcing people who are exposed to the markets where they are going out to get the goods,
Right.
they are really very well informed what's going on in those countries. And they need to bring the message back to their management and say, you need to explore. I sincerely believe most of the people are ill-informed about the possibilities and the scope available for their own goods. I mean, I wouldn't want to buy a brand, Italian or whatever brand, if it is not made there. Why would I pay premium dollar to pay for that brand which is made in China or Korea? And the same thing applies if we have a LA brand and we branded it right. Absolutely, we must manufacture it here. Goes back to Ilse's questions, and everybody else's here is in agreement to that. We just don't have enough people. We talk about bringing the jobs back. Who's going to do it?
Well, let me ask
Who
the
is
group-
going to cut sew? Who is going to do the banking? Who is going to finance it? It's easier for me to go to my factory and say, you know what? The easiest route is to just outsource it.
Did you look at my questions before this? All right, that actually is a great way to segue into two things here. The business/regulatory climate in California. Is it conducive or not conducive for you to do business? And Governor Brown announced a month or so ago his efforts to try to tame Prop 65.
The problem is a catch-22. You don't know the rules until you're getting successful. There is no education process on how to do it right from the get-go. So our biggest problems are companies who are starting, chugging along, and then stopped because somewhere along the line somebody catches them at something that they didn't know they were doing wrong. So a lot of it has to do with education at the point of getting your license to do business. I mean, that is clearly an issue. But we have more companies, we have a 6 to 8% increase in the amount of companies registering with the state of California. And you must be registered, just so that anyone in the room who isn't, registered in the state of California. We have 6 to 8% increase every year, even in the worst years. So there's always someone starting a new business. That's the good news. Overregulation, yes, but there's overregulation everywhere on various issues. Wisconsin, Illinois, they both now have versions of Prop 65. And ours is particularly egregious because there's a bounty hunter provision on it. But it's creeping across the country.
So I'm going to ask for the city's perspective on this. I know you only got a day left, but you can.
You know, I really, I don't think that that's the right discussion for this room right now, is to talk about what's Proposition 65 and the regulations. I think we've gone through that. I would like to talk more about the solutions that we can do. What we can do to move the government, whether it be city, state, or national, is very difficult, takes a long time. And Kevin, that's what you're doing. But I think, I might be wrong, but I think the people in the room, we want to hear about the solutions and how, with where we are right now with the regulations, whether they're good or bad, what can we do to help with the limited resources? And I keep going back to tools, like the tools that are available, what the government is doing, and what the private sector is coming together to do, and how this industry could come together to change things. I feel like there's a lot of, we work with, as I said earlier, we have 12 industries that are fast-growing industries here, and the majority of them have worked really well together to move not just regulation, but solutions to exporting, to foreign direct investment. And I really feel like, and I could be wrong, but I really feel like this industry does not come together in the way they should. And as power in numbers and collaboration is always helpful. So I really can't speak to Proposition 65, nor do I really want to. I want to move the conversation more solution-oriented and less about government regulations.
How about the rest of the panel? They agree with that? Because we did talk about we need to come up with solutions. So I'm going to ask, as part of the solution is get rid of debt?
Well, the solution is to get rid of some of the regulations.
Right. Which is, as we all know, it's a long-term proposition. And you know, I do see some light at the end of the tunnel with Governor Brown, and if they can actually get something through the state of California that might help in the states that Ilse mentioned. That the problem is the government doesn't understand when it's over-regulating. It's kind of if you put like a kid in a candy store, they continue to eat candy until they get sick. And I think the problem with the government is that they regulate until they can't regulate, and they're putting people out of business. And
but
I think,
Kevin, when I've been on some of these trade shows and trade mission and investment road shows, it's not, I've seen state after state doing a really great job with promoting their different industries, and they have some of the same regulations. I think the problem in California that I can speak to is that we do not promote, come together as a group to promote our state and our products. We were in Mexico, and LA was the only presence of California there, and Texas was there, and Florida was there, and Arizona was there. Everyone was there promoting their industries, their top industries, talking about their competitive advantage, but we weren't. So we can keep pushing on the regulations, and California has had regulation after regulation for a long time, and it hasn't changed in 20, 30 years. But what they can do, we can push on them to promote our state abroad in the way that Korea comes together and the Kotra is out there promoting their whole country and their different metropolitan areas. The way Jethro does that in Japan, but we don't do that. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, we know there's regulations, we know there's problems. We've been saying this over and over for years and years and years. But what can we push the state to do or the government to do that is different than what they are doing beyond regulations, where they actually have resources to promote our country, made in USA, made in LA. So I'm just trying to get to something, I'm just a glass half full type person than looking at the government and what they're doing wrong, complaining. But there are things they can easily do and that we can do, and in partnership with the private sector to impact this. And I'm not here to say I have the solutions. I actually want to hear from the private sector and from the people what can we do, knowing the regulations, knowing the issues, but is there something that we can come together and talk about to do to change things?
Well, there is one solution is that if everyone in this room put on their product designed or created in California. Just start there with the concept that it starts here, just like Apple. And once it continues to start there, perhaps the made in California will follow.
well, one of the things, I think that's a great idea. The other thing is other states that promote their own economic activity. Those of us that live on the East Coast, that other part of the country, yeah. We see Governor Christie, New Jersey, who is promoting business in New Jersey after a terrible hurricane destroyed most of its coast. And he's standing there cutting ribbons on boardwalks, promoting business in New Jersey. Now, the easy solution, and I've been around politicians all my life, they love to get in front of cameras, they love to get publicity for what they're doing. Why don't you go to Governor Brown and say, we have this thriving but challenged business in Los Angeles that needs your help? And how do we get that to do? And I might be naive thinking this, but bottom line is, how do we get your governor to promote an important economic industry in your state? And Carlos had his hand raised down at the end there. Carlos, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, a couple of things. You know, with all due respect to the governor, I think he's been pretty busy with the budgets and other things. But also, I think that one of the situations that we find in dealing with the state government is that in Sacramento, there are very few people that they're advising and working with the governor that understand international trade or global matters. So when you have advisors that they don't understand global trade, global investment, the governor's not making any decisions. And so this is the reason why the Los Angeles Regional Export Council has become very important, because today the governor's office will look at us for opinions and comments. As a matter of fact, they've asked us to represent the governor in international events. That is because we understand international trade. And just another comment. You have I have brought some copies for this document here. This document was produced by the Brookings Institution together with the Chamber, the Mayor's Office, UCLA Anderson, and USA Marshall, and both ports. One of the things that is very important is that we in California, regardless of our industries, we think we know the world, and we don't. A lot of times the world knows us, but we don't go outside. And so my recommendation would be we need to be very aggressive, and we need to go and look at other markets, because we are not a global society.
Okay. Anybody want to comment on that on the panel? Do we agree that? Oh, we get.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, Tracy, these questions that you're asking about advertising and marketing, promoting Made in LA. This is a conversation that Nicole called me in about a year ago. I own a fashion.
What's your name?
David Perry. I own a fashion design and production company here in LA, and a larger part of what we do, and I've spoken to Ilse about this many times, is branding. The importance of branding. It was a question I had for Deborah. Do you think, for instance, that Apple commercial is advertising is a perfect example? If that was a true religion ad that said tariffs have increased, you know, get behind our brand. We're not going to move our production to Mexico. We're sticking to our guns. We're sticking to our brand. We're sticking to our brand story, our loyalty to the state. We're not going to move our production overseas. We're staying here. Do you think that your loyal customers, do you think that would have offset that cost of going to Mexico, that saving that you're getting in Mexico, by saying, you know what, we're going to advertise the fact that we're not going to do this. We're not going to succumb to this. We're not going to let this affect our economy, our local economy.
Well, first, I just want to mention that I didn't say we moved to Mexico. I just said we moved. So.
Have you moved to Mexico?
I think I spread that rumor right now.
No. That's the obvious choice. But,
yeah, it's the obvious, choice. But no, that's. I really don't know how that would work, because. First of all, we didn't move all of our production to Mexico. No. There's still a lot of product that's made in USA that will continue to be made in USA. So it's not our customer in the US that's really going to be impacted by the fact that there's some women's product that's not being made in USA. That product is really being made for distribution in Europe. So the question is whether the European customer really is not going to be as interested in the product because it's not made in USA. The difference is that they'll be able to get the foreign product at a greatly reduced price. It will be affordable for them. With a 38% duty rate, the made in USA product would be priced outside of their range.
But do you think that that's going to damage your brand identity in any way? Have you measured that?
Well, the customer doesn't know about it.
I don't know that it will, and I have to say that there are other products that aren't made in USA because, as one of the other panelists or someone in the audience mentioned, is that for some products, there really aren't good sources for manufacturing within the United States. So much of the industry has been decimated, and so much of the skill set is no longer available that sometimes when you need a product, you've got to source it elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So we do have product that is sourced overseas. It's the denim product that I'm talking about now, specifically the denim. And we haven't found that the consumer has been greatly troubled by the fact that maybe a woven shirt or a t-shirt or something is not made in USA. But we do still especially on the t-shirts, we do still try to put some sort of a hang tag or a marker that is designed in California.
Just so you know, that some of the major brands like Seven for All Mankind and Guess make European product in Europe. They make it in Mauritius. They don't even make it here.
I've one comment from personal experience. I traveled with Tracy and Carlos in Latin America and South America. While we were in Colombia, just by chance, we bumped into the governor of Florida, who had brought in 200 plus companies. And we were only 2 companies from California. I know that our people went on the grant given by the city to Hong Kong, and there were another 2 fashion companies. We still sit down here and try to throw rats on the government, but we really have to look at ourselves. What commitment are we making what initiative are we taking to take our company outside? And I tell you, that 10-day trip that I made with the mayor and his people, that was just absolutely mind-blowing, eye-opener for me. I had no idea. I'd never been to those countries. And the city of Los Angeles, the Department of Commerce, they provided me with assistance like you wouldn't believe. And that assistance was available to everybody. And I know that a lot of people were approached and they did not take it. Shame on them.
Hey, Greg, tell us how you really feel.
I have to have a drink for that.
Andre, we're going to get to the questions in a minute. I'm watching my time here, folks.
I really like Rob's comment, and the reason why is that I've often have this debate with people, and as much as we want to, become this sort of, export-driven, or follow this export-driven trend, we shouldn't forget that we are still decades behind our peers in terms of this industry, and revitalizing this industry in a way that it's prepared, that it can actually engage appropriately, is going to require us as an industry to put down, some groundwork. And I think a lot of what Rob mentions, and a lot of the things we're doing in sort of the partnerships with the mayor's office and others, is really around stimulating, laying that groundwork. Because let's face it, people are not going to be able to buy LA products if they don't have awareness of LA capabilities, right? They're not going to, and you as producers are not going to be able to be a fit for those potential buyers if you don't know what their requirements are and what they expect and how they want to engage. So there's a lot of preparation that needs to go into getting into this market and becoming a global exporter, because again, we have been a consumption market for 30 plus years. And if we want to become an export-driven sort of hybrid of a consumption market, that's going to require us to be committed to laying down the kind of infrastructure that's going to make us successful in doing that.
You folks make the most visible product in the planet. Almost everybody in the planet wears clothes and shoes. And I honestly think the industry in total, both here in the United States and globally, has not taken advantage of the power of what you do and what you make. And to Ram's point, if a governor or a mayor or a local official who wants to promote, or an industry that needs to promote its brands and its product abroad, can't get together and say, well, we are only 5% here in the US, our expansion is global, so where are we going to sell? So delegations of Californians going to Japan, delegations of Californians going to Central America. That's really, you have to do that, because sitting here saying that we're only 5%, that's nice, but you're never going to grow. It's kind of like that book about who moved the cheese, and the mouse who stayed around waiting for the cheese to come back never saw the cheese. So you got to be the mouse that says the cheese is not coming back. So there's a two-edged sword to this. There's the continuing manufacturing in LA, which we're here to promote and try to make certain that the Europeans don't wreck that. But the other part of it is that there are other markets that need to be tapped into, and the advantage is the USA brand is strong. So what it really has to do is, it's kind of like that old United commercial from years ago. Many of you remember, where the boss walks into a boardroom and all of his senior staff are sitting around, and he says, "This morning I lost my longest and oldest customer." And why? Because we forgot who they were. And so he started handing out United, of course, he's handing out United tickets to them to go around the world to reinvigorate what they were making. And I have no idea what he's making, but the point was this: you need to get out, and you need to move your product, and you need to promote your product. And I think for both the domestic production as well as the international, that has to be the case, that you have to be able to be willing to spend the time to go out and do the promotion on what you make in order to expand your market. Now, we have about half an hour here. I have one question I want to ask the group, and it's kind of the elephant in the room here. Not only dealing with the European situation, which I certainly hope that the Europeans will come to their senses and drop and make it more competitive here, but let's talk about access to capital. Access to capital. When we had our call the other day to talk about what we were talking about, we talked about all the regulations, and I forgot who it was. I might have been Marty. Who was it?
It was me.
Oh, it was you. Okay. Okay. Access to capital. Let's talk about access to capital. How critical is that? Not only to keep your business here in the U.S., but to expand your business elsewhere. And let's start at the other end of the table. Actually, You know, in the middle here, let's go here with Marty. Marty, you've been a little quiet in the last couple of minutes. We got to get your engines going again.
Well, I used to live by the rule that, you know, it's better to be silent and appear stupid than open your mouth and remove all doubt. But you know,
well said for a guy not from California.
We, of course, we've experienced in my 12 years at American Apparel, we experienced a time when capital was very difficult to come by, and it's quite amazing how we were able to grow a company without it, primarily because we were doing something that everybody said we couldn't do, and a lot of conventional thinking in the financial industry, you know, supported the fact that we couldn't do it. I think more so now when you're talking, especially with the talk of reshoring and the talk of you know, made in the USA coming back, then you know, I think the financial arenas are looking at it as a viable option. So there's more options for us now.
Good. Tracy.
Through this work that I've been doing for the mayor's office, I found that the biggest issue, even if we educate everybody and everyone's ready to promote their product, is access to capital. And the biggest problem with that is risk mitigation on the banking side. They don't, our U.S. banks do not see, they see exporting as a risk because they don't know if you're going to get paid, if your good's going to make it there. So mitigating that risk is a big part of that. The government actually has 2 programs, but there's the SBA has some programs and Ex-Im Bank has programs, but there's requirements around it that can stop a business from qualifying. So there's a gap there for financing. And I can't go into the details now, but the Los Angeles Regional Export Council has been working on bringing back a program that California had that was very successful. It was self-sustaining, self-funding for 10 years, and it was decimated for political reasons, but it was the California Export Finance Office. And it had a rate of maybe a default rate of less than 2%. It gave capital to companies that didn't have, your only requirement was California and your small or medium-sized company. And it was purchase order. And a purchase order. So it could be used for working capital. It was very successful, and we've been trying to figure out a way to bring it back. And we, as I said earlier, we're not waiting for the government and the federal government, and we're not waiting for the California government. What we are doing is doing a pilot here to bring back CFO, it's called, and then we're going to call it Southern California CFO. We have banks lined up, and we'll be announcing it maybe in a month or so, but that's going to really change the equation here in the Southern California region, access to capital. So stay tuned for that. Carlos will be your contact. I'll still be around a bit around this, but that we know this is one of the biggest issues, and hopefully we'll be able to, for California and Los Angeles companies, we're addressing that.
All right, so Carlos, tell me what the Chamber is doing to promote what Tracy just talked about.
Well, I was very fortunate that in the 80s and the 90s I was part of the structure of the California World Trade Commission, and we had the California Export Finance Office, and it was a fantastic program. It was such a fantastic program that many states, including the federal government, basically copy the California Export Finance Office. And again, it was a way in which if you were a California company and you had a purchase order overseas, you could take that document to CFO and get some funding for your export financing sort of activity. And because again, we could do all marketing, you could do a lot of trade shows, trade events, but if you don't have money to export your products or buy your products and then re-export, then you're not going to be successful. So the Chamber has taken a very bold approach in international trade. As a matter of fact, I can tell you today, the Chamber is one of the largest chambers in the country and in California. And we are, believe it or not, which is not a good thing to say because I think others should get more involved, we are the only Chamber of Commerce in the state of California that has international programs. That should not be the case. And so I have always been challenging other chambers of commerce throughout the state to get more involved in international trade. And so our quest has always been creating more jobs in the community through exports. And we started this program in 2008, 2009.
Okay. Deborah, you want to add to that?
capital for international expansion hasn't really been a problem for True Religion, but what we do find when we go into a new market is that we haven't sometimes assessed really what the cost of the expansion could be. What a lot of people, maybe when they're budgeting their expansion, don't realize is the incredible amount of marketing and other efforts that you have to put into that market to create the brand awareness. So if you really want to grow into another market and not just have, maybe some minor distribution, you need to invest in that market. And each market is a little bit different because each market has a different culture. They have different style sensibilities. They have different advertising messaging that resonates with the consumer. So it's something that you really need to consider if you want to hit a market running. I do want to add one other thing, though, Kevin, that is a little bit digressing. I want to say that the current administration has done an exceptional job about promoting the importance of IP protection and innovation in the United States, and I think that our country has the most robust intellectual property laws in the world, and our government is also very active in promoting intellectual property protection all over the world and working with younger governments, less developed countries to help them shape their intellectual property laws. We've seen more countries accede to the Madrid Protocol in the last few years than have acceded in many years. So now you have a lot of new members, including Mexico that just joined, Colombia that just joined. And what that means, in order to be a member of the Madrid, you have to have certain IP protections in place. And that means that your brands going into those countries are going to be afforded more protection. That should give you a certain level of comfort expanding. But another thing that the young companies do have to realize is that as you are going global, you really do need to protect your IP.
Ilse, I'm sure you have something to say about financing IP and other things.
Just in general, going into exports is a cost, is a line item on any P&L. It can't be handled by your existing staff. It's a whole nother cost structure. Analyzing, as Deborah has said, I mean, we go through this all the time. If you go country by country to protect your IP, if you wanted to do an international protection, it's $125,000 bare minimum. If you wanted to do international protection. Country by country, varying costs. But that is a line item on your, you can't just say, wake up one morning and say, Charlie's going to do it. They're going to call France and see if we can get into France. It doesn't work that way. So the whole issue of getting your own house in order financially so that you can go out and get some financing for international trade, that's the way it works. I mean, as Tracy said, this is purchase order financing. This means you've gone there, you have an order. Then you can get the financing to produce the order. But getting there has to be a financial line item.
How many people in the room have experienced, and maybe I'm asking an obvious question, how many people in the room here, first of all, have asked for alternative types of financing for exporting your product, and have you had trouble doing it? Okay. Trouble or both?
Well, our company, we're a denim manufacturer, right? But we're heavily contracting, so we depend a lot on companies to come to us for business, okay? I've approached companies like Chase Manhattan, Bank of America. They've all been to our factory. I mean, we have one of the largest factories in the city. We contract. We've done business with every brand in the city. But over the last few years, it's been a little difficult because all the brands are really pushing you down and down and down to where your margins are less than 10% in some cases, and it becomes very difficult. I mean, we're going to launch our own brand now so that we can make a little bit bigger margin, okay? But that's always the issue about, they come in there and they want to see your books. How much money did you make? I mean, I asked Bank of America for $500,000. I asked Chase for $500,000. But it's almost like the only way I can get the money is if I don't need it.
Well, that's a strategy.
Yeah. And they came to our factory. We employ over 200, 300 people in our factory. I mean, we've been in business for 25 years in Los Angeles, and we're still struggling, okay? And, I mean, I've spoken to the city. We've had, you know what we're doing in our new line? Our new line, it says very big on the pocket lining inside, made in Los Angeles, California, USA.
Great.
Big letters,
Yay.
okay?
There you go. Yeah.
But what is that going to do for me? I mean, you know, we need to set up some programs that actually, if you're willing to really go into this and really promote the city, because I've been talking to the city, okay? There must be some way of incentivizing this part of your business, okay? You know, and we talk about made in USA. You know, the difference between maybe a lot of people on the panel and me is I'm in the trenches pushing for business, and I'm not True Religion. True Religion is a different world. True Religion is a public company with their own stores, and they have massive margins in their product, and I don't think their customers directly care that much in some cases, whether it says made in USA. But I'm looking for business all the time, and I approached almost a lot of the major brands, big brands in this country. And I said, why are you making in China? Jeans. Los Angeles is the center of the world for denim. Just like the movie industry was, at least at one point, the center of the world, I think the denim industry is the center of the world. We created the denim world here with Levi, and now with every premium brand in the world is basically made in the United States and in Los Angeles. Just seems to me that we should get together as a team. Maybe we should all go to Berlin in a big, massive group to make sure that people realize that this is important. I mean, and I'm not a brand like J Brand or Page or Hudson. Even though for 5 years we made almost all the J Brand production, okay? But now, because we're squeezed, I could tell you that one of the biggest brands in the country in clothing came to our factory to look for moving their denim from China to the US. But they don't want to pay anything. You know, they were pushing us down to margins that were like $2.
It's one of the challenges of, you know, best product, lowest price. And that's, you know, unfortunately, where the industry, because people don't want to pay as much for clothing as they had before.
No, but what we need to do is to force, it's like marketing. We have to market this city around the world. We have to push, just like that ad from Apple. Why aren't we doing ads in the New York Times? In Europe, made in California is important, especially to the denim industry.
Right. You know, I've had that conversation with City about a year ago, and the answer I got was we don't have the budget.
Yeah, we don't have the budget, but
Have a budget
Yeah.
for a huge return.
we don't.
The city you're invested in, I don't understand that.
But so we don't.
Nicole, that's nothing against.
No,
It
it's
was a great conversation, and it's doable. Look at the milk commercials you see in the papers. You see a celebrity in there with a milk mustache.
Right.
You know, somebody's getting behind that milk marketing board, whoever it is. Why can't somebody get behind the City of LA? And I know you just crowdsourced a logo, and everybody I know in the industry, from the top to the bottom, groaned.
That advertising, by the way, the milk advertising is probably the most successful generic advertising campaign ever.
So
we changed it. But I'm just going to say really just real quickly that
he's right, by the way.
he is right, and I was actually hired to market Los Angeles, but never given resources myself to do it, and I was put on something else. It's just when it's political, and it's hard to get that priority on the list. And we're trying. They're starting to, and I have to say, I will say this, that this current mayor did try to market. The challenges we had with our budget of being at one time half a $500 million in the hole made that challenging. Then what I will say is the next mayor really does understand marketing. Now, whether he'll be able to find the resources to do this, I don't know. But we are, and I've been trying to get back to the Tradegood platform. We are looking for ways and working with the private sector to find tools to market our brand. And they're not going to be as great as an advertising. I remember you talking about it. It won't ever be there, but hold on. But I would like Andre to kind of talk about what one of the steps we're taking with the Design and Made in LA initiative at Tradegood.
And can I add to that for you, Andre? Because
Sure.
I was going to offer you the last question before we open it up to the audience here. But
Absolutely.
you've been gracious enough to host this event with us and with the others. We talked about a lot of challenges here. Some challenges that are easier than others, some that are more long-term, some are more short-term. I think the gentleman over here who made the suggestion about advertising in LA and you know, trying to replicate the milk commercial. Why can't you do that?
We'll do it at
But-
cost.
do it at cost. But to walk away from this meeting today, you're not going to have one idea. You're going to have several. But the success of this meeting is as to what you do with what we discussed today and who's going to take the reins and be able to do it. It's nice to talk about stuff. But at the end of the day, you got to do something. So, Andre, I'm going to lead you right into what can Tradegood do, okay,
I
to
feel like
help
everyone
these
is
people
waiting
here.
for a silver bullet now.
And there you go, right at you.
I just want to say, I mean, I like both of your comments. In fact, even though I'm not a manufacturer, I echo, I should say, your comments and your views, because I believe no matter what product you're involved with, if you don't promote it and people aren't aware about your capabilities, of course you're not going to be able to sell it domestically or abroad. One thing I want to say before I go into talk about a bit about what we're doing with the city is that you'll also be surprised it's not just about attracting overseas buyers. Believe it or not, you have the same problem with domestic buyers. We get phone calls every day from domestic buyers that are producing everything from goods for the Olympics to all sorts of one-off runs, and they all are asking the same thing: where can we buy? Even though they live in California. They simply just don't know. So we've been able to really work, through the assistance of Tracy and Carlos and Nicole and others, and we've been able to really work in putting together what we think is the first step, is the foundation and the infrastructure to be able, we need a backbone for this city to be able to even market and sell it to anyone, because, we don't have any way of marketing or selling everything if it's too fragmented. So we've worked over the last 6 months to put that together. And really what we are going to be doing, and I would say, and this is what the purpose of this event really was about, is really to let the community know and let the industry know that, there will be steps being taken to promote, advertise, market the industry domestically and abroad, starting with, first making the information about, who you are visible, making people aware, and embarking on a lot of active campaigns. And I do like your idea about leveraging some of the assets that are here, whether you're talking about celebrities or even other, well-established companies that have done it well. We've already even started those conversations. So really, I'm looking forward to being able to really sort of take the reins over from today and really move it forward. And I think you'll find that you'll be hearing from a lot of us from the Tradegood family and wanting to engage you folks to really get more ideas and to figure out different ways for being able to sort of move the needle forward. And one of the things I can also share with you is we do have buyers that want to buy today in LA. And again, the challenge, just to make it fair, the challenge again is not just about creating the infrastructure and the information and making capabilities available, but it's also about us communicating with you and letting you know what it's going to take for you to get that order. Because I feel your pain in terms of being squeezed. But there are, I think, some interesting opportunities on the horizon. We've had some even big brands that have said to us, if you can identify certain producers, maybe we can even work with them in terms of capital financing. Maybe we can work with them in different ways, depending on what types of goods they're able to do with us. So I know it might sound a little bit strange, but it's really interesting that as companies are more attracted to this sort of made in USA cachet, they are also opening their eyes to different ways of engagement, and that's something we've not seen before.
Right, but developing some equity in the brand made in LA, turn it into a brand, because then it has value, and that value will create demand for his services, which means they'll pay for his services.
And
instead of saying, well, it's cool and trendy now, let's nickel and dime you, they're going to say, made in LA has got a value to it now. I can actually afford to produce at his factory, so he has his margins, and I have my margins.
And I want you guys, could you guys, just so I can get a plug in for our plan here, We have 3 strategies to the Los Angeles Regional Export Plan. Strategy number 3 on page 9 of the plan, market the Los Angeles region to the world. So it's part of the plan. We are raising the money, and we want to partner with you to do that. And you'll see the strategies in here that we're trying. We know that we have 3 strategies, and the third and not that in particular order is marketing. And so we understand that. And I want to talk to you afterwards so we can really kind of figure this out.
So Tracy, do you see this group here and others as being an integral part of helping develop that type of made in LA using different types of product? For example, the movie industry markets itself as being here, the
Yes.
clothing business, the footwear business, and you put some clothing, which we know, on stars, attracts a lot of attention, and you'd see Brad Pitt standing there saying, "These jeans are made in LA." Proud to see.
Yeah, and that's exactly. I mean, you made the point that this industry is the most visible branding industry for us. Medical equipment isn't sexy. I'm sorry, it sells a lot, and neither are
They think it's sexy, but
it is in our other 10 industries. But this one is. The branding is right there, and it's the best showcase for Los Angeles. And the city, we're government. We're not the best at that kind of thing. We have to hear from you and bring you together to do that. So I will never say we've done a great job doing that, but we do want to have this conversation and continue this conversation, even though I have 1 more day left.
So the fact that she has 1 more day left and we have 10 minutes before I get the hook here. Now it's time for questions. And we have the first hand in the back here.
Thank you. My name is Janetta Martinez, and I've been in the industry for about 20 years. And I just see the question being shoved aside in regard to the government. And one of the things I want to say, and then I'll finish my question, I just recently seen in Brazil where they raised the transportation cost, and the entire country went nuts. They said, "We're not going to stand for this." And they reversed it. And I think this is more than just the manufacturing industry. This is bigger than just California. This is bigger than just Los Angeles. This is all of the American people. And we are so spoiled, and we are so, we've had life so easy. And I think that we just really need to come together as a whole country, and we need to stand up and we need to put this all together. And government does need to change, and where's it going to start? It gets shoved to the back burner constantly, and that's where the root is, and that's where we have to start. My question is, for this strategy plan that you mentioned, Section 3, is there funds there? Is there a budget there? Because that's constantly the other thing is like, well, there's no budget for it, there's no budget for it. Government needs to be accountable, and where's the budget? I mean, because as you look at these businesses, they have to be accountable. They have to show that they don't really need money so they can get money, or that they have the money in the PO and it's coming in. The government needs to be accountable too, and all the different levels.
Well, the Los Angeles Regional Export Council is not a government-driven organization. It's a partnership between government and the private sector. That said, we've raised, I would say 99% of the money that we've raised has come from government, and the private sector isn't stepping up like it should. So I am not, I mean, just because I'm here, I'm the government person. I'm from the private sector myself, but most of all these programs, all these offsets and subsidies that we've paid for companies to go to Hong Kong, to go to South America, to go to China, to go, to work with Tradegood, all that money came from federal government funding. We're going out to the private sector, and that's been the most difficult, is getting the private sector to understand that they can win from this too. So, yes, we've been trying. And it's not full, I have to say it's not fully funded yet, but we're getting there. We're getting close. But we have programs that we're able to do right now with the funding from the government. But to really expand it and to do the marketing is honestly going to take some private funding to help us.
Well, government funding, just to make sure everyone does understand, is private funding because it comes from us. So not to be, I mean, this is our money. And so we do want to be the watchdog of government to make sure they spend it appropriately and in a fashion that actually does us some good. So if we as an industry here in LA, and I've been here since '83, but I came from New York, I've been in the industry my entire life, and have exported, done all of these things that we talk about doing. But unless we get together, I would rather see us build a group using the groups we already have, but come together here in LA. Let us promote LA. I don't think government does a good job of doing that. So if government would like to give us some of our money, if they want to give it back to us, we would be happy to accept. And also, as many of the textile associations over the years have done, the members, they may pay X amount. So let's say it's $25, $50, $100 that goes to the marketing budget to promote us as an industry. Now, we've done that in the past. In the 80s, we were in seventh heaven. I mean, Levi was buying millions of dollars worth of textured wovens. We covered, the asses of the masses in polyester. But this is something that we need to do as a group and accept the government's help, especially in the export field, because you can't do that alone. You really need to know the regulations and the infrastructures of those markets, how they market, what are their regulations, etc. But for all of us who took the time to come here today, let's commit, get together, spearhead that through Ilse. I'll be happy to get involved and do my part, but let's do it. Put together a master plan so we know what the regulations are, what the trade barriers are. How do we promote and get sewers? I work with a lot of manufacturers. They have signs out in front of their buildings. We need sewers. So how do we train people? I'm sure there are people who want to do that, but government can't train the sewers. Again, we need a group of manufacturers who will put together a group who will train sewers, maybe with the government's help, giving us some of our money back, just a reminder. The sources of supply. A lot of the smaller manufacturers don't understand where they can get things, so we need a group of maybe a clearinghouse. This guy can only buy 500 yards of fabric. This one can buy 300, but they all want the same fabric. So to help them with economies of scale, maybe we need a clearinghouse for that, where they can go and say, this is what I need, we put it together and make sure they get it. Marketing, government assistance, and capital. So, I mean, all of those things together we can solve. Individually, obviously not. So I guess what I'm saying is let's put our brains where our mouths are and get together, because this room has so many talented, educated people, and we can do this together.
Hey, before I ask Marty to respond to that, terrific comments here. How many people here have asked for their money back? Yeah, seriously, how many people have taken the time to contact their member of Congress and say, I need your help? I mean, I pay X amount of taxes. I pay 35% of my money comes back here. How many people have asked for it back? I mean, the only way you get is by asking. And if you don't ask, they don't think you want.
Do I count?
Of course you count. Of course you count. But Tom? Marty.
She asked for the whole CFA.
Oh. Marty?
I think, of course, absolutely marvelous comments. One of the comments I do want to approach, I think that's my role in this panel, is when we talk about where do we get sewers, and Ram, you alluded to it earlier, who's going to do the work? And I think it's very valid in all of this when we talk about made in LA, made in the USA. And of course, you work with people across the country. I work with people across the country. There is a lot of talk about made in the USA product, about reshoring, and in talking with people in the Carolinas even that that kept their business and now they're trying to grow their business, or people who are trying to catch a wave and start a new business with this. The number one thing they're telling me is we can't find people, and it's not even find experienced people. It's find people. Okay, it's people that want to pursue what we do as a manufacturer, as a professional apparel workers, to pursue that as a job or a career. So that's why I mentioned earlier in one of my questions that I believe that the immigration issue is key in all of this, and the fact that if we are truly determined to reestablish a manufacturing base, especially for apparel and textiles, that we're going to have some help, and whether it's the ability to go out and recruit, but even more so the fact that we're able to employ the talent that's already in this country, and the talent that's already here in Los Angeles. There's so many marvelous professional apparel workers, and I call them professional because I truly believe that they're as professional as any of us at their trade. And yeah, Ilse mentioned earlier about the fact that we had 1,800 people that are many of those people in this area that have that talent, and Janet's here with me, and she was a big part of working to tell these people that they couldn't be here anymore or be with American Apparel anymore. And the odd thing about that was, and a point I want to make is that, in that short time that we let those 1,800 people go, I didn't see one little green man running around. I didn't see one alien. I saw mothers. I saw fathers. I saw husbands and wives. I saw people who were doing their best to survive, to support their families, to create a dream. And so I think what's in front of the Senate now, what's in front of the Congress now, is it's the right thing to do, but it's very critical in what we've been discussing here as far as really being able to reestablish, And the last thing I would say is that when I retire from this industry, after you.
Oh, that's never going to happen.
I really, and one of the reasons I was at the Senate a couple weeks ago and talking to senators in this same issue is the fact that, I don't want that part of my career where I'm shaking hands, I'm hugging people, and saying goodbye. And again, these folks weren't sent out of the country; they were just sent out. They were just out on the street. Okay. I would much rather, before I retire, to have the memory of shaking their hands and hugging their necks and saying hello, welcome back, welcome home. And that's what I would say about that.
Marty, I'd like to make a comment on your thoughts. You and I go back a long time, and we've been in manufacturing forever. I think everybody agrees that innovations happen in the manufacturing, in the factory. Design may happen, but how to make it better, it happens in the factories, where the manufacturing is. China just taught a very important lesson, and if that is not a wake-up call, I don't know what it is. In 2012, they signed up more than 10,000 people, guaranteed their jobs in Bangladesh to produce for Chinese market, so the Chinese factories can continue to export at a higher prices to bring the trade back in. And guess who's training the Bangladeshis? The Chinese are going there, who we trained. We trained. 25 years ago, I was doing consulting. We were teaching Chinese, and they were not asking how we can make it cheaper. They were asking how we can make it better. Today, they are teaching. Today, we are teaching Chinese how to design, how to develop, what our fit is, who our market is, what price do we sell it at, who do we sell it to, who is our designer, who's our sourcing person. We're educating. We need to bring it back home. We cannot be distributors, and we cannot be just talking about this. We need to manufacture here, and we need to put it all together ourselves. Forget government.
Well, Ram, there is no industrial education in the city of in the region of Los Angeles, none. So we have a 36% dropout rate in high schools, and these kids have nowhere to learn manual labor. There's concentration that everybody should be a nuclear physicist or a technology expert in college, and that's not going to happen. And we have no education for the next round of sewers, to your issue of industrial training. And the industry is more than ready to support any public-private partnership in terms of industrial training. There just is no interest in people who do manual labor. That's something that we're fighting.
So, sure.
In 1974, in Canada, we were a shortage of sewing machine operators. So we went to the Philippines and we tested sewing machine operators to bring back to Canada, okay? Local people don't want to be sewing machine operators. The people who are growing up here in Los Angeles don't want to be sewing machine operators. They don't want to be pattern makers. They all, if they're in the fashion industry, they want to be fashion designers. Yes, but the thing is the big brands have to come back and say, we want to make it in the US. Go to the government, says a shortage of operators. Let's go find those operators and bring them to this country. Not legal or illegal, bring them to this country on a work visa that they can work and reproduce. Otherwise, we could talk to a blue in the face, we're never going to get anywhere. We brought 6,000 Filipinos in the first round. I'm a Canadian too, so we both started our career 40 years ago working for the same company. We brought 6,000. At that time, almost everybody lied that they are sewing machine operators. And within 3 weeks, they were out of the industry and taking banking and hospital jobs. We were hired. I was there personally in Manila teaching the immigration officer how to test the operators, how to thread the machine, and how to sew this and time them. And we found out within 2 weeks, there were schools out there who were teaching how the test is going to be, so there were doctors and nurses who can get trained. Look, we've had the challenges. We brought people from Korea. 8,000 people were brought in from South Korea into Canada. Industry just took them, welcomed them. You know, in Canada, very cold. People were embraced with the coats and so on. Housing was given by the industry.
No visas for manual
But I
labor.
tell you something.
None.
You know something? We do need people here. And I cannot echo anymore what Marty and you guys have been saying. Look, we're taking people who have very little education and put them in the army. We put them in the army. Why can't we train them in the garment industry, in the industry? There is no more army required.
One of the unforeseen pitfalls of this is that we end up with subpar labor, which is subpar product.
Well,
And we're seeing this a lot in the factories here in LA now, is we're seeing product which is not good enough.
Right.
So that's another pitfall which people aren't really paying attention to until their product comes out and it's not sewn correctly.
well, my job is to kind of wrap things up here, folks. We've hit the issue. We could talk about this for a long time. Takeaways from this. There's a lot to do, but as somebody said earlier, if we don't do it now, if we just walk away from this as saying this is a nice seminar, big deal, nothing's going to ever happen. I like the idea of trying to promote this industry in this region the way the milk guys do. What a great idea that is. And it can't be that expensive to do. And the industry itself supports it. We've determined that regulatory environment is difficult, it's challenging. There are opportunities outside this region to sell your product if, in fact, you look hard enough. And I'm getting a nodded head here. But we can agree to disagree. That's why we have these things. But before we finish here, I wanted to thank our distinguished panelists for their time and their effort, and thank all of you for being here today. So thank you. And I'm sure people will be around here to answer questions.